to do is turn his face away from the podium.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. No, we're good.
Yep, no problem.
It's fantastic modeling work. You should put that on your resume now.
What's that?
Modeling work. It's on your resume now.
I always told Eric to do his biggest gestures too. Yeah, like
Now you're trained.
Yeah. And do your biggest gesture.
Ah.
Oh, actually, that's great to do because.
But that's pretty close to him too.
You don't think that's great?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I probably won't do that
use
day.
that one.
Probably stay somewhere in here.
Again, angle.
One more time with your biggest gesture. Okay, perfect gesture. I've been caught off guard if you try to go, whoa, that was like
swing to catch that.
He shows wax on and wax off.
Actually, I did go out a little bit, didn't I?
What does that translate into?
Maybe hello? Sunday? Could be Sunday.
Oh, wasn't bad.
Interesting.
There's our new band name, guys.
And it's, thank you.
Chin.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, okay. I'm learning very slowly.
I was teaching Apollo Spanish over the weekend. She started with words like albóndigas, which is meatballs.
Important thing.
Because it's a funny word, albóndigas.
You learn what else does to your taste.
Yes.
Sometimes it's meatballs.
Yeah. Bigote, which is mustache. Meatballs, mustache, and basura. Trash.
Are we doing on time, Lindsay?
1 minute.
Okay.
If you're ready, we can start setting up. We don't need to put that on today.
Yeah,
Okay.
we've got multiple speakers, so we're just.
Okay.
But good effort. Good
Yeah,
effort.
yeah, appreciate it.
I want to make sure we do what we need to do.
Yeah. And I can hear you, and I can see you,
I'm just sitting here on the floor.
and I can see Jesse's
Biggest sign.
hands. Yep.
All right, guys. Is everybody set up? Because we're going to do our countdown.
I know, I saw that earlier. I'm not sure what that is.
It's not going to show on camera right now.
I'll get it.
I think I bumped up against a car this morning.
Yeah.
Some car dust on me.
All right. I'm going to start our countdown unless anybody has an objection.
Countdown, it sounds so formal. Good morning. This pandemic has us all anxious. The uncertainty of how deeply this novel coronavirus will affect us all has us all a bit on edge. Concerns of contracting the virus or losing a loved one, concerns of losing a job or finding a job, or rebuilding a business that's been impacted by COVID in a way that inspires confidence so that customers will feel safe and supporting. These are all constants in our life. For those who work in mental health or behavioral health, they see challenges in a world that looks much differently than it did 6 months ago. Isolation, fear, and loneliness can all take us to places that we need help getting out of. More than 2 in 5 Americans report struggling with behavioral health or mental health conditions as a result of the pandemic. This is according to information published by the CDC. Uptakes in anxiety and depression, increased substance abuse, and suicidal thoughts have all been reported with the pandemic across our country. And this continues along with a virus that continues to spread without a cure. The stresses associated with COVID-19 disproportionately affect several populations: our frontline workers, those who take care of adults, and those who are in treatment for psychiatric conditions. Our Hispanic and Black residents also report increased mental health and behavioral health issues as they see their loved ones impacted more by COVID-19 than other races or ethnicities. When we received $173 million in Federal CARES Act grants, I said that these funds would be spent where they were needed the most. Part of that response was asking residents in distressed zip codes how these funds could be spent to help them. So in addition to access to health care and PPE, they told us that they would like to see expanded mental health and behavioral health services. So today I'm pleased to announce that 16 organizations have received grants totaling up to $1.8 million to expand access to mental health and behavioral health services, such as counseling, psychiatric treatments, substance abuse treatment, recovery services, all with an emphasis on telehealth and mobile service. Leaders of 3 of these organizations are here with us today to talk about the work that they do, how COVID-19 has affected their work, and how these funds will be used to expand access to services in our community. So let's begin with Laura McAllister, the CEO of Places for People. Laura?
Hey Sam, can we take just a second? We're having a little sound issue, so I don't want to, let's just take one break. Good. Yeah, yeah. You're aware, we're taking a quick pause. Thank you.
Technical difficulties, sorry, thank you. All right, ready to go now.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Laura McAllister and I'm the CEO of Places for People. Places for People is a certified community behavioral health organization that's been working with people since 1972, providing behavioral health services for both mental health as well as substance use challenges that people face. We serve approximately 700 people that reside in St. Louis County, and we work with people across the lifespan, so which includes programming for children, adolescents, adults, and seniors. Much of our work with people we serve is typically done face-to-face in the community, including providing assistance, obtaining medical and psychiatric care, case management services, as well as therapy services. Oftentimes, we provide these services in people's homes as well. Early during the pandemic, particularly during the stay-at-home order, in the spring, our organization had to figure out how we could continue to provide the services that we provide as safely as possible. Even though our organization is considered an essential business and we could remain open, many of the people that we serve have other health conditions and could be at higher risk for complications if they developed COVID-19. A modified version of traditional telehealth services was the immediate and somewhat obvious solution for us. However, many of the people that we serve don't have phones. So some that do have cell phones either run out of minutes each month toward the end of the month, or they don't have video capability on their phone, or they don't have internet access. We needed to be able to provide the people that we serve with cell phones or tablets, internet capability to continue to connect with the people and provide them the critical services that they've been receiving. Places for People applied for and received funds from the Humanitarian Response Program from St. Louis County under the technology category, and we've been able to purchase cell phones and tablets and provide video telehealth services. We've also already been receiving funding from St. Louis County Children's Services Fund, and the funding for those services expanded to include telehealth services added to that grant award. So the combination of the two is extremely helpful. More recently, we also received funding under the St. Louis County CARES Healthcare Response Program to create a mobile clinic for behavioral health services, and are in the beginning stages of working through the details of bringing up this clinic and how it will be used. With mental health struggles on the rise, we are grateful to St. Louis County for the funding received so that Places for People can continue to provide critical behavioral health services that people so desperately need. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Laura. Next, I'd like to introduce Nicole Dossi, who is the Executive Director of the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse right here in St. Louis. Nicole?
Good morning. So yes, my name is Nicole Dossi. I am the Executive Director of NCADA. For the last 55 years, NCADA has worked to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use, and we've done that through 3 ways: intervention, education, and advocacy. In 2019, we served over 64,000 kids, K through 12, in our 7-county eastern region. 40,000 of those were right here in St. Louis County. We also provide counseling services at greatly reduced or no cost to adults, to teens, and to those that are looking to find support. We are not a treatment agency, but we do help people navigate the resources that would be best for them. And finally, we do provide Narcan distribution to sites all across our 7-county eastern region. In mid-March, it became quickly apparent that our services would become more critical than ever. Uncertainty, anxiety, and despair can lead people of all ages to cope in unhealthy ways. We quickly saw overdose rates skyrocket. We saw teens struggle to make sense of the new reality. We saw caregivers depending on alcohol simply to get through the day. So we knew that we needed to quickly pivot, seems to be the word of the year, all of our services to virtual, not just for our own survival as an organization, but for the health and well-being of our clients, and quite frankly, for the health and well-being of my staff. There was lots of behind-the-scenes work to make that happen. Pivoting services that have existed in person for 55 years to virtual doesn't just happen overnight. We needed to create a safe environment for my staff of 60 scrappy folks ranging in age from 19 to 78 to create the services that our clients desperately need and to make those services available virtually. We needed a safe environment. So the CARES Act funding that we received enabled us to make building updates and improvements that would protect my staff as they did that work. We installed things like plexiglass around high traffic areas, around our receptionist area and our lobby. We put in hand sanitizing stations. We did those things that now, quite frankly, have become commonplace in many of our restrooms and many of our offices. I would like to extend a special thanks not only to the county, but specifically to the city of Olivet, where our main office is. The folks at the Olivet city office were really helpful in helping us make those needed improvements. The world can feel and does feel really scary and unsettling right now. I would just urge folks that if they need help and support for themselves, for a loved one, for a teenager, to please reach out to us for help. We are here. You can reach us at 314-962-3456 for any help related to drugs, alcohol, or if you need access to Narcan. Again, 314-962-3456. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, we'll hear from Marion McCord, the Executive Director of the CHADS Coalition. Marion.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm the Executive Director of CHADS Coalition. CHADS is an acronym for Communities Healing Adolescent Depression and Suicide. Most of our, in fact, all of our programs are school-based. Our first program is the Signs of Suicide program, where we go into schools and we talk to the students, middle school and high school, about what does depression look like, and most importantly, what can you do when you recognize those warning signs. We do screens in the school, and in that program alone, we talked to almost over 57,000 students last year in the St. Louis metropolitan area. The second program that we have is our social and emotional well-being. In that program, we work with the younger student, primarily elementary age students, where these students have been identified by their school counselors that they are struggling in a social or an emotional way. They're just not fitting in. These kids are referred to us, and we work with them one-on-one and through evidence-based program, the CASTLE Competency, to help us build and support their social and emotional well-being. The third program that we have, which is also school-based, is the clinical arm of CHADS. In that program, we work with kids who have been identified by their school counselor that they are having concerning warning signs of extreme anxiety, depression, and some of those students are also talking about taking their own life. All three of these programs, since they are provided in the schools, when COVID hit, it was a really tough position for both the students as well as our organization. Things kind of came to a screeching halt very quickly. We too pivoted very, very quickly. We redid our strategic plan, and we did develop telebehavioral health. I am so proud to say that all of our programs are now delivered through telebehavioral health. And because of the funding that we receive from the county on this grant, as well as Children's Service Fund, we are able to provide all those programs to the kids virtually. And we use this money to help support CHADS in terms of we had to equip our staff with the right equipment, whether it be laptops, cameras, microphones, so that we can continue to deliver these services. Like the other agencies have also talked about, the need for our services, the need for mental health is off the charts. I can see the isolation, the stressors that children, parents, faculty are facing just puts all of us in a very difficult time. So we are so grateful, and this support is critical for the survival of not just our agency, but for the children as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marion. I'd be glad to take any questions. You have anything, Doug?
I do not.
When we talk about kids that are struggling, whether it be socially, emotionally, or both, are you able to speak to, I assume that it's being exasperated by the fact that a lot of these kids are in isolation when it comes to virtual learning. Can you speak to that at all and how that's being addressed?
Sure.
We are trying to address it the best we can. We're working with those kids, and we also talk about how has their life changed at home in terms of how has COVID impacted them. and the stresses that they're having, and being able to give a platform to those kids to talk about it, to really integrate and interweave it into all the stressors and the reality that it is hard. And most importantly, giving those kids hope and giving them tools in terms of what can they do to help get through those challenging times. And it's all done virtually now.
Is that, in your professional opinion, is it easier to do in person rather than virtual? Is that ideal, but that just doesn't warrant it right now?
I would say it is much better to do it in person. When you talk to small children, in terms of if you wear a mask, that's a huge barrier. But doing it virtually allows us to take the mask off because our whole face lights up when we talk. So we'll get back there soon, I hope.
Yeah, come on, Nicole.
Just to piggyback, so I would say that virtual, that's one of the kind of amazing ways that we were able to put some of the CARES money to use, is really do some equipping our agency to be safe, to bring our staff back in, to do dress rehearsals. There's a lot of really amazing resources out there so that when we do virtual programming, we have some good models to look at. I will say that it requires a different skill set. You are having to pay attention to body language via a computer, which makes it a lot more difficult. So our counselors, not only for teens and young kids, but also for adults, are really getting, quite honestly, they're getting tired easily because they're just staring at a screen and they're really trying to pay attention to that body language that would be difficult, or that would be much easier if you were in person. You also can't always pick up on the size that teenagers make or some of the eye rolls or things like that. I will say, too, that, so I mentioned that we served last year 64,000 kids, and that's kindergarten through 12th grade. And the teachers that we've been working with who have been so gracious to recognize that even though there's academic constraints that they need to get in and they need to get those Common Core standards, met, that there's also a real need for the social and emotional learning, as well as for prevention too, because just because a kiddo isn't exhibiting signs doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't struggling. And so the teachers have been really great. And I will say just one of the things that we struggle with is having the kids put their screens on and actually be present when they're learning. I know that that's something that the teachers are facing as well. But when the kids are showing their faces and when they're actually engaged, they're loving the interaction. So I will say that the teens that we are working with and their caregivers they're concerned, right? They're concerned about kind of how their lives have changed, and they also recognize that the ability to talk and get help through a screen is better than trying to face some of these challenges by themselves. So it's a step. It's not the preferred way, but for right now, it's what we have, and we've been able to pivot really, really well and really nicely, and lots of the organizations have as well. Sure.
Kind of similar to that. We talk about the potential for drug and alcohol abuse.
Yes.
In our community, do we tend to see that translate into other issues such as domestic violence in situations where people at least previously were locked down in a certain space with people? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I certainly cannot necessarily speak to domestic violence, although I do know that was for sure on the rise, especially at the beginning days of COVID when people were kind of stuck in their homes. I know that most services, over the summer we sort of reached a plateau. Not that people didn't need help, but maybe that people weren't asking for help, or that people were struggling to make sense of how much longer we were going to be in this. Now the organizations and many of us still meet and still talk and discuss kind of what our clients' numbers served are. It seems like now the numbers are starting to go up again. And so that's domestic violence numbers, that's sexual assault numbers, that's all of the things that you typically kind of lump together when you're talking about mental health and behavioral health. I will say that with the economy being shaky, with social unrest that's going on, with the election. All of that sort of seems to be compounding and showing up in lots of different ways, including domestic violence.
I have one last question for Dr. Page. It's kind of off topic, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Just curious, talk about how you feel, what your reaction is to some of the school districts in the county announcing last week that they will go to play sports elsewhere, despite kind of what you put into place.
Well, we hope that our school districts will follow our public health guidance and keep the kids safe. And we'll work with all the school districts as they implement these plans and try and help them be successful. Our number one priority now is getting kids back to an in-classroom setting if the parents choose to do that, and making sure that that's safe. And we're working on the younger kids, working very closely with the school districts, and our Department of Health is in constant daily contact with them to make sure that their plans moving forward are safe. And that's where we're spending our time. We hope that folks will follow our guidelines. Guidelines are different for different sports and based on ages of the kids participating in those sports. All of them are allowed practicing in skill development. Some of them have limited competitions. And this is a very difficult time for all of us, not just with schools and sports, but dealing with people who are sick, loss of lives, jobs that are threatened, businesses that are struggling. And that's why we're here today to talk about the mental health impact of the pandemic in general. It touches all of our lives. But I do think we'll get through this. We faced a lot of challenges in our community over the years. If we come together and focus on where we need to go, what we need to do to stay safe, everyone is going to be making sacrifices across the board in all walks of life, all ways of life. We'll get through this together. I'm very confident of that.
Do you have any indication at this point or any idea of how it will fare for the county as a whole if you do have young people who have seen high positivity rates going out to other places to play a game and then coming back into the county where they live, and do you see any residual?
Well, there's a lot of mobility. You know, the virus doesn't stop at the state line. If people are flying, it doesn't stop at our airport. It doesn't stop at our county jurisdictions. We know that people who live in other counties drive back and forth into our county to work, or drive from our county into other counties to work. So there's a lot of mobility across the board. And we hope that people will follow our public health guidelines. We'll wear a mask whenever they're not 6 feet apart. We'll continue our social distancing guidelines to stay safe. We believe that the decisions we've made in St. Louis County have put us in a better place, in our state, in a better place than a lot of the country. We've made a lot of sacrifices in exchange for that position. And we're going into the next few months where we're going to face some difficult times until the vaccine is widely available. We want to be in the best place possible moving forward and recognize how this touches all of our lives across the board. And we want to recognize the mental health and behavioral health impact and recognize where those services are and take advantage of them.
Is it frustrating at all?
Well, we're here today to talk about that frustration and how it evolves into behavioral health and mental health challenges. We're talking about the county's commitment to those services, especially in areas that don't have access to a lot of services, for populations that don't necessarily have the resources to engage in those services. I think frustration is the theme of this pandemic, and it touches everyone's life. We have to deal with illness, hospitalizations, and loss of life. We have to deal with people who have lost their jobs or looking for work and finding it difficult. We have to deal with businesses that are struggling, and we have to deal with all the frustration and depression and anxiety that's associated with disrupted lives. It's a very different world than we were living in 6 months ago, and we have to recognize that everyone is affected in everything that they do. But if we stay focused, recognize the resources that are there, recognize that this is a time period that's measured in months, and we are past the worst of it, but we're not through it.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.